So back in April, I ran into some story on MSN, which is the first website that fires up when my computer launches the internet browser. It was entitled Six Phrases Adult Children Want to Hear from Their Parents. And I loved that I ran into that at the time because if you guys remember, in March, that's when mom got in her wreck, and April and May were undoubtedly high stress, scrambling months because she was preparing to move out. Therefore, life was just changing pretty rapidly. Up to that point, I remember I was revolving around my parents a lot. And then reading this put into perspective something I didn't know I thought about it needed, but I hadn't seen it in a formal, organized fashion. So I saved this article to revisit it months later. I'm revisiting it today and see how I feel about it and if it still feels the same way as I felt back in the spring. If I remember, I will link this article to the description. As we mature, the relationship we have with our parents is bound to change, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. So when it comes to my relationship with my parents, I don't know why, but I thought that when I got older, my dad maybe would make more appearances in my life because I felt like he might have been deliberately absent from my life because he gave me the vibe that he simply did not like children. And bonus points if you're a girl. Like, what the fuck is he supposed to do with a girl, right? But if anything, he has been more absent from my life now because there aren't any big events, big achievements for him to show up to. For instance, my graduations, anything like that. He's just not there. And now as an adult, the only times I've seen him is when my brother was around and when he makes plans to supposedly hang out with me, he doesn't. So I just looked at it as, okay, this guy is just inherently bad at this, shit at this. And I too am inherently bad and shit at this because I cannot give someone attention who has behaved in a way that makes me feel like they don't care for my attention. I'm one of those people who relies a lot on reciprocation. Even if I'm not good at it sometimes, like sometimes I'll have people text me or message me and it takes me a little while to get back to them. I'm like, hey, haven't forgotten about you. This is what I'm going through, but I'll be back, I promise. And I always come back, even if it takes me days or weeks. But at the very least, you know that, hey, I haven't stopped thinking about you. Now, my dad has tried to be more present in the form of sending me messages. Like, he's like, hey, just remember I'm here if you need me. And I'm like, sometimes I just want to be sassy and be like, you should be here, so I don't need anything. Something like that. But then I said, I'm not in high school. I don't need to have that kind of an attitude. So with him, I want to say it's still meh, neither better nor worse. Now with my mom, that's been a roller coaster ride because years ago, 6-7 years ago, we had this big fight. I don't even remember what the fuck we fought over, but we went about a month living in the same place, in the same house, and not saying a damn thing to each other. It was like I barely even saw her because our schedules happened to be different. And even when she lived here, she would get off late in the evening to where I wouldn't really see her until before bedtime if I went upstairs. But other times it was the weekends was the semi-guaranteed day I could see her if she stayed home while I was at work. When I came back, I could see her, but sometimes she would have things to do. So maybe it wasn't until toward nighttime that I may hang out with her for 1 or 2 hours. And that was about it. At some point, I could feel that my relationship with her was like neutral. it wasn't getting better, it wasn't getting worse. But then I thought, well, it makes sense because I don't really have to rely on her quite as much. I'm not a student, I'm not in need of money, like, hey, I need school supplies. When you stop being in such a vulnerable and needy stage, I guess it's natural that you will begin to explore your independence a little bit more. The times that I can say that our relationship would get kind of bad is whenever we had our disagreements, and our disagreements could be sometimes about the way of doing things. I have a more calm and relaxed approach, and mom is a little bit more aggressive with some stuff, and I'm like, you need to learn to calm yourself down about the things that you cannot control. And then after that, there would be times in which she was better than me at doing just that. So then I thought, maybe I was the one who needed to tell her that to make her aware. So let's actually dive into the article now that I have given you an intro. On this article, there is what appears to be a tweet attached to this, or maybe it's an Instagram. The format is very similar, I can't tell. But anyway, someone posted, things adult children want to hear. I didn't know what you needed, what can I do now? My father should definitely try that. I was in survival mode. That I can understand. I actually told my mom that that's how I perceived her now as an adult. I'm like, Ma, the reason you fell short on some things is because you were in survival mode. And I get it. When you're in survival mode, it's like your primal instincts kick in, your eyes dilate, you grow fangs, your skin gets tougher, whatever, your hairs stand. But survival mode, what I've been trying to say all this time, it has an effect on your children because it is a matter of perception as well. And that's something you cannot ignore. And I don't want to say that I was too intimidated by my mom to communicate with her in any way, but I'm just saying that there were things that happened as a result of you being in survival mode that affected me. And anytime I would try to bring it up, you would get fucking defensive. That's why we would fight. We wouldn't get anywhere because you got defensive because you were getting offended by what I was saying. But if you cannot hear me, you will never understand my needs. And I understand that as a provider, sole provider, that is super stressful. But even then, there are some things that you may be neglecting, that you may not be aware that you're neglecting because you're too preoccupied ensuring that the basics are met. Food, shelter, bills. That's great. That is important. But understand that in the process of you being consumed by fulfilling those things, some things are not getting your attention. That's what I was trying to convey at the time, but I never got the chance to tell you that. And I guess it also doesn't help that I too was having my attitude issues. And I thought, well, if you can handle other people's fucking children professionally with a sweet attitude, you should be able to deal with me, your literal child. I'm supposed to be the privileged and preferred one for you to talk nicely to. But no, you held me up to a different standard. You could use your professional skills outside of the house, but at the house you gave me the worst. That is what made me mad. See what I mean? And I get it. It's not hard for any parent, for anybody to hear that at all. But if you're hearing it, at least pay it some mind as opposed to just getting defensive and dismissing it because it's offending you. Look at it as, damn, you know what? I'm so glad you have the guts to confront me in this manner and letting me know, no, I'm gonna work on making it better. Boom. That's it. That's all you had to do. But no. Do you want advice or would you prefer if I just listen? That's very nice. Usually, to me, giving me advice, if you have it and you know it's a good one, is something that you can inherently always offer me. Because I'm not one of those people who just likes to speak because I like to make noise, produce sound, and I love the sound of my voice, whatever. If I'm making it to the point to where I'm talking to you about something, I do want your input. I do want your intervention. If I didn't, then for instance, online, since this is the way I interact with you guys, I would completely turn off the comment section. Or in real life, I would just never talk to anyone about anything. I would never share anything. If I'm speaking to you in the first place, it's because I feel like you have the authority to be the proper audience member for what I have to say. And I trust you. And because of that, inherently, I would expect that you know that I want your advice. Like I have said before to some of you over the years, through the comments, I love to be oriented. Nothing brings me more joy than someone sitting down with me and talking me through things. Because that's what makes me a better worker, a better friend, a better girlfriend, daughter. I guess over the years I have learned to pick the time, pick the way of addressing it, and pick my audience very wisely. When I'm talking to a parent, I want to say that their authority to me is like the most powerful one. Therefore, yes, I would want your advice. Even when you upset me, I still love you. I didn't handle that well. Let me try again. You're right. Oh my God, parents never seem to be wrong, right? I want you to find out what works best for you. You don't have to do it my way. Thank you. I'm proud of you. I enjoy your company. The thank you one killed me because I remember a time when I don't want to say my mom wouldn't thank me for anything, but there were things that I'm like, damn, a thanks as opposed to some kind of reproaching remark or sarcastic remark would have been better. And the being proud of me is something that I would never hear after I got out of school. And when I was in school, occasionally I would hear it. And the only way I would hear it is, let's say, geometry. I was not doing so well at that class. My mom had no way of helping me with that class because she herself sucked at math. But I want to say it was for geometry when I passed the test and I told her, Ma, against all odds, I passed it. She was like, good job, I'm proud of you, something like that. I enjoy your company. I mean, I'm pretty sure that my mom inherently enjoys my company, so I don't really need her to tell me that. But I guess from this author's perspective, maybe telling me that they enjoy my company is supposed to feel like, oh, I'm grateful that you visit and that you check in with me and that you talk to me, things like that. I don't know. I thought it was a strange one. I never thought about it. A healthy adult child and parent relationship takes work and is a gift. We're not entitled to healthy relationships without doing the work required. And that I can agree with because you guys have seen the evidence here on the channel based on the stories I share. The most rewarding relationships with me are the ones that orient me, challenge me, test me, all those things. Basically, the things that other people get intimidated by and feel judged by and feel discouraged by, that's where I thrive. Adult children often yearn for validating phrases from their parents, such as acknowledging past pain or expressing understanding. These affirmations can hold significant healing power, especially when parents may have been preoccupied with their own challenges, leading to unmet emotional needs in childhood. I can relate to all of that. Number one, I'm sorry. These two words are what many adult children want to hear more than anything else. I sincerely don't think that mom has said she's sorry ever. And it's strange because if she were to tell me she's sorry, it would have a huge impact on me. But at the same time, I don't expect it from her because not everything was her fault either. And I guess that her and whatever she is a victim of, she too is owed an apology. So maybe until she gets an apology from whomever she's supposed to get an apology from, she may not have an example of an apology for her to be able to project apologizing to me. See what I mean? Because unfortunately, mom and I and my manager, who's one of my best friends too, we are people who we're just never wrong. And what I mean by that is before we speak, before we do anything, before we say anything, we have all of our evidence gathered of how we are right. It's kind of like Japan. In Japan, the police is not going to come after you until they can, with 99% certainty, prove that you're guilty, and therefore there is no escaping the law and justice. That's kind of how we are. We tend to be the people who we observe something, we will gather the info, put it all together, and whenever is the best time, we will sit you down and launch it, fire it all at you. And even if you say something, we have a way to hit it back at you. In a sense, I guess for someone who has been like that, who has been in survival mode, and survival mode is defensive mode as well as offensive mode, it is hard to get to that point where you, as someone who's owed so many apologies, how can you be the one projecting that you're sorry if you haven't even had a model of someone being sorry? I don't have an issue with that. I will immediately own when I'm wrong. I love that feeling because I can feel how my adrenal gland relaxes. It's like, boom, I was like firing off at you, but all of a sudden you say something that forces me to stop and accept that, hey, yeah, I'm doing something wrong, or I'm not so great at something. And then I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I'm so sorry. This is where it came from. Things like that. That area, when you say sorry and the next bridge that follows it, that is one of my favorite things, because after you say you're sorry, what happens afterward determines if this is a reconciliation or if this is ultimately going to be where things have to end or change for the worse. You're like saying, I'm sorry, is like the transition word that you need toward the reconciliation. And I feel like that's something that doesn't happen very often. As Gen Xers and Millennials and some Gen Z as well start to reflect more on their upbringings, they have started to fully recognize how their parents' choices impacted them. In some cases, some choices posed some challenges to their mental health. Being able to be validated and apologized to by their parents would be a huge win for adult children who are seeking to break some negative family cycles and move forward in their lives with better mental health. And this is true because you guys can attest that pretty much my whole channel has revolved around that. And I'm glad this is an exercise that I have been conducting now for over 10 years. I didn't start doing this when I started the channel. I started doing this way before the channel, when I started writing my journals pretty much. Most adult children understand their parents aren't perfect and have the best intentions when it comes to parenting. Some parents struggle with acknowledging unintentional or intentional hurt they may have inflicted on their adult children at any stage of their life. How can we work through this to the apology can make it even more impactful? See, like I said, it's how you handle that will determine the reconciliation. Taking ownership not only creates space for emotional repair and connection, it also models humility and relational healing for the adult child, which can transcend into other relationships in their life. And that's what it's supposed to be. Your parents are supposed to be your history. Whatever they pass on to you is supposed to be what the future experiences. Now, as a worker in retail who deals with the public a lot, I can tell you that it is very easy for me to identify when we hire a broken ass worker. And what I mean by that is when we hire somebody and you start seeing certain behaviors being exhibited, there is that chronically apologetic person, chronic apologitis. They have to say sorry after every damn thing, even when they don't have to. You can tell that this is probably someone who grew up being possibly abused. And then there's the individual who is super extremely polite, because you know that if you're not polite, more than likely someone was gonna clown on you. One of your elders was gonna like call you out on it. And then there's also the workers who are totally, completely, utterly clueless. You'll talk to them and they don't understand anything because their parents have not taken the time to orient them about things like benefits, being on time, how to manage your time efficiently, how to communicate effectively, all those little things. And by extension, if your parents are absent, your school performance is going to suffer too, because I think that school and parenting should be collaborating with your upbringing. It shouldn't just be the school's job to teach you how to express yourself and write and critically think. Those things should be reinforced by your parents. But how can your parents do that if they're in survival mode, overworking themselves to provide for you, and you never see them and they never see you? And that's where the disconnect starts. And some parents enter this denial stage when they start hearing from the school that their child is acting up, but they're acting up because they are trying to, I guess, make up for that neglect. It's hard. It's super hard. I wouldn't want to be in that position. And that's why I say, unless I'm guaranteed that I have a way to absolutely be there for my child, I am not gonna have kids. Parents from certain cultures may have a harder time apologizing to their kids, communities of color in particular. As a therapist, I work with a lot of Black clients specifically, and oftentimes when they express a concern about how they were raised, parents can become defensive or obstinate. This can be for a lot of reasons, of course, some of them personal and others cultural. There can be a lot of pressure to save face. I think it's incredibly healing for Black families to try and normalize parents apologizing to their children when appropriate. It's certainly not the norm, but hopefully it becomes more common in time. And this is true because I remember very vividly in school how if you ever said something bad about someone else's mom, these other kids would get so defensive about it. Even if they're troublemaking kids, they would say stuff like, you better not talk shit about my mama. So childish, right? But when I think about it deeply, it's, yeah, you don't want to hear someone saying bad things about your mom when she's the one trying to ensure your survival, because for whatever reason your dad is not in the picture, or it just can't be, they just cannot be together for whatever reason. We're not going to get too deep in that because women are not faultless. I just want to make that clear. The failure of a relationship is both parties having problems. And sometimes I wonder if my mom having a career contributed to the deterioration of her marriage to my dad. And the reason I say that is because, again, my parents were pillars in society. She was a teacher, he was a cop. She was a teacher with children of her own. And at some point, when we are born, her attention is gonna have to be redirected to care for us, because when we are infants, we can absolutely fend for ourselves 0%. We need to be addressed and served round the clock. Some men might look at it as, I'm being neglected, therefore I'm gonna go out there and act stupid because I can't handle being deprived or not being as tended to as I was used to, even if it's temporary. Hey, when the baby is like fresh out of the oven, you can expect that I may need to be a little bit more absent from you. It doesn't mean I don't care or I don't love you. It just means that this being literally demands more from me than you, because are you gonna be the one staying at home dealing with this? No, shut up. There's more to it than that, but just so you know, I'm aware that women do things wrong in relationships too. Someone who specializes in working with adult children of immigrant parents said she has noticed her clients' family struggle in this area. The parents may have been raised in an environment where they needed to focus on fundamental needs like safety, while their kids may have grown up with those needs met, allowing them to focus on prioritizing things like emotional connection. For my clients and myself, it might mean having to shift our expectations that our parents may not be the ones to initiate emotional connection. That is something super true, because if it hadn't been for my meltdowns at my mom, I don't think this conversation would have happened, because unfortunately, just like at my job, I am so good at projecting that things are fine and pleasure even when you're irritating the crap out of me, that it doesn't open up the possibility of this coming up. And sincerely, sometimes I just don't like to dwell on it, because are you shitting me? I just came back from work and now I have to come home to do more work, and on top of that, social work. At what point do I get a break? And I understand that growing up, the whole point is supposed to be that life is no longer about you, but I'm thinking, I can't have that approach. I have to feel like I matter, because if I don't matter, then I'm going to start neglecting myself. If I'm going to neglect myself, I'm going to get sick. If I'm going to get sick, I'm going to create a dependence on somebody. Somebody else is going to have to tend to me so that I can stay alive or let me die. It's very complex. This can get complex very rapidly. And there is grief in never knowing that type of relationship with your parents, but we as adult children can certainly try our best on our end to create the relationship we have always wanted with our parents as well. And see, fortunately, after all the shit that happened in the spring and all the meltdowns I had over the years leading up to the biggest one I had over the spring, that helped me strengthen my relationship with my mom because I could see that she took it seriously. I understand that it might have hurt her and shocked her, but she started telling me that she loves me. She started telling me nicer things, sweet things more often. That if she was expecting me to be the kind of child who is like, mommy this, mommy that, mwah, like, I'm not that kind of kid, because that's just not the relationship we continued to have after my pre-adolescence, or it's not something that she was doing. She wasn't being loving and affectionate like that toward me. Why would I continue a behavior that is not corresponded to? It's not reciprocated at the very least. Number two, I was in survival mode. While this statement is not an excuse for poor parenting or bad behavior, it does recognize that while the parent was trying to manage everything, they did in fact drop the ball. As a young adult, especially one without children, it can be very hard to think of your reality of childhood outside of you being the child, versus as this adult who had a job, who had to come home and cook and still have friendships, who had to do all of these things while parenting you. Talking about everything they had going on at the time can provide some useful context and understanding, and that is something I'm very aware of. If I had more support, if I had more resources, if I had more finances, if I wasn't going through a divorce, if I wasn't struggling with X, Y, and Z, like really recognizing those things and being able to speak to them can be very healing for the adult-child relationship. And that makes sense because even before I read this, I was aware of how I cannot be a mom, considering that I have to do all of those things enumerated there. And I thought, well, if I cannot indulge in all that, then let me avoid a problem. Let me avoid a thing that will aggravate the situation. The kid. Our parents were likely doing the best they could with the tools they had available at that time. They may not have the keen awareness of their emotions or the communication skills we expect of parents today. Having tough conversations with your parents and having them acknowledge your experience as a child can be healing in repairing the relationship between adult and child. And this is true. I cannot say that I had trouble talking to my mom, but I feel like I had to reserve conversations with my mom for things that were meaningful. I had to make it count, and anything that had the potential of escalating into something stressful, I may have avoided it, because not only did I want to spare me the bad time, I wanted to spare her the bad time. I'm really proud of you. No matter their age, kids want to know their parents are proud of the person they have become and what they have accomplished. A lot of aging parents brought up their children to be better and strive for more than the parent had available to them. This has propelled many of us with some confidence and anxiety about how well we're doing. Hearing "I'm proud of what you have done and who you are" can be a beacon of light for aging millennials who doubt their achievements and position in life. And this is true because I know a lot of my peers who had parents who ended up divorced, but they still had a fair relationship with both of them, one parent closer than the other, of course. Usually, people seem to be closer to their moms than their dads. But they have said, damn, if only just because I'm minimum wage, I still heard my parents cheering for me as opposed to shaming me for not having accomplished better. When it was their job to ensure that I could accomplish better, then I would be at least emotionally and mentally feeling a whole lot better. My mom, she silently lets me know that she's proud of me. And the reason I feel confident saying that is because she always recurred to me as her own personal resource. And even in my status as someone who doesn't have like this incredible career despite the potential that I had, she never held that against me. She never told me that I let myself go to waste or anything like that. She said, well, at least I can see that you do well with very little, and you genuinely are simple, and you don't complicate your life, and you're not harming yourself with, say, drug habits. Why not be proud of that? I could be a problematic kid. Better yet, I could be an accomplished person career-wise with an alcohol problem, or say neglecting the children that I had even though I probably shouldn't have. All those things, but instead I'm living within my means and within what I find reasonable, which is simple. And although simple is underwhelming, she can respect the fact that I'm making it work and that I'm not asking her to resolve my problems. All of my issues, every problem I have ever shared with you guys that I have had, I can say I have resolved on my own without her intervention. On my own doesn't mean that I completely by myself did things. I had intervention from friends, I had ideas and things like that come from other people, but the act of me lifting myself up, that always came from me. I can say that. And sure, she contributed on some places here and there, but it's not like, oh my God, she had to babysit me through every step of the way. If anything, I think she might have been alarmed by how very little I was recurring to her. Your life path is different than mine, but I support you. Some parents may push their grown kids to follow a similar trajectory because they believe it to be the right way. Perhaps it feels more familiar, conventional, or stable to them. However, there are many paths that can be gratifying, even if they're quite different than the one your parents chose. I think that's supposed to be quite different from the one your parents chose. Hearing them say they respect and support your decision to live life on your own terms is powerful. That mom has allowed me to live life in my own terms. And she knows that I have the ability and potential to teach, maybe not quite as strongly as her, because obviously she had the education, she's the professional, she has the experience, but she knows that the powers that I have, I still use them, even if it's not in a formal setting. I don't have to be in a classroom to be a teacher. I am a teacher at my job. Anytime I have to train somebody, and I take training seriously because I understand that the quality of training that you provide will determine how this person approaches work, and anything that may be daunting for them, I can help neutralize it based off my experience when I was new too. And that's what veterans are supposed to do. They're supposed to simplify things. This affirming statement recognizes the individuality of the adult child's journey and affirms their autonomy in making life choices. It conveys parental acceptance and validation, fostering a sense of empowerment and emotional well-being. Number 5, do you want advice or would you prefer for me to listen? Adult parents have to remember that I too have bumped my head. I too have made bad decisions, and I am only speaking from a place of wisdom and knowledge after trying some of these things that my kids are talking about. Asking directly whether you're looking for guidance or just a listening ear removes any guesswork from the equation and shows they believe you're capable of handling it. When parenting an adult, the job is not always to protect, as it might have been when you were younger. It is now to listen and observe, one of my favorite exercises, and ask you if you want some feedback. But hopping in and saying, oh, I have the perfect answer for you and you need to do this, sometimes it's not welcome. And I get that, but like I said earlier, I welcome being oriented. Even if I end up not acting on your orientation. Though it's natural for parents to want to shield their kids from making the same mistakes, it doesn't give space for the adult child to assert themselves as their own person, nor does it allow the parent to learn who their adult child has become. I'm still here for you. There's something beautiful and comforting knowing that even in adulthood, your parent can be a soft place for you to land. The job of parenting isn't over when children reach adulthood. The relationship just changes. I remember that a stream I was on years ago, I remember saying something like, why is it that parents cannot be more involved in your life after age 18? I feel like some parents are like, hurry up, age 18 on this kid. And then after that, it's like, oh, okay, you're 18 now. Good luck. Fuck you. I think having that attitude is bad. While aging parents should adjust their focus from spending the bulk of their time tending to their children to other personal pursuits, it doesn't mean they cannot still be involved and respectful allies in their children's lives. Figuring out the right boundaries while still maintaining an active presence and care is a delicate but important dance. And that's it, you guys. So overall, this was very comforting and warming to reread. When I read it the first time, I remember feeling, wow, this is something I have known, but seeing it organized and focused like this helped me revisit some things and conclude that, hey, on my journey toward healing from my past and mending certain relationships, it seems to be that I'm on the right path, even if it's not exactly in that order or as enumerated here. But at my own pace, I'm getting there. Reading this article is an example of me enjoying being oriented, because I could have been like, phrases that I need my parents to tell me. I don't need to hear anything from my parents now that I'm completely away from them. But when I think of the things I have journaled about over the years, I have ranted about over the years, I have cried to close friends about over the years, it's like, yeah, this list enumerates what my venting and ranting from the past has been about. This simply compiled it. Well, there you guys have it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts on this one, and I'll see you next time.